Welcome to this edition of Thought to Action, presented by the Herb London Center for Policy Research. I'm Lieutenant Colonel, retired Tony Shaffer, the president of the center. If you enjoy this content, please check out more of our content. We do a series called China Red Alert, where we talk about China threat. We do a very rambunctious monthly show called Ask Us Anything. If you're a Patreon, you get to ask us questions. And obviously, like, share, subscribe, follow us on social media, do all those great things to help support our effort to get great information out. And so today, speaking of great information, we're joined by one of our most distinguished fellows, Dr. Steve Hatfill, who is a virologist, a doctor, and the author of 30 Seconds to Midnight, a great book that talks about virology, biology, the issues that we've been faced with over the past 18 months and more. I'm very proud to introduce Dr. Hatfill. Steve, welcome to Thought to Action.
Hi, thanks, Tony.
So, Steve, we've been working with you before people knew this was coming. As a matter of fact, you and I worked together, was it January of last year? When before anybody else recognized what was going on, we started having a dialogue. It's like, there's something going on here. We need to pay attention. And so you have most certainly been at the forefront of this, trying your best, using your expertise to talk about what's really going on. That's why we're here today. Right. And so one of the things that you've done is help give context to the current the current vaccine mandate regarding DoD, about what I believe is going to be an inevitable decrease in readiness. And so that paper, God bless you for doing it, thank you for doing it, is now on the website. You've gone on and continued to work to put out factually rich, completely well-researched and bookmarked. And boy howdy, I've got a copy of your paper here. And I always love pointing out that everything is footnoted. Everything is footnoted. It's completely
peer-reviewed research.
It's academically credible, which is a word that people don't seem to use properly these days. So the title of your new paper, which we're going to be talking about today, is Reference Facts for Mothers Concerning the Pfizer COVID-19 Vaccine for Children ages 5 to 12. So I hate to editorialize, but I just think this is evil. I mean, I'm a layman. I have a degree in environmental studies. I'm not a scientist per se, but just reading this, Steve, this is evil. Just go into this. The first thing, unlike adults, children are naturally resistant to serious COVID infections. Let's talk about that for a second.
Their death rate is almost zero.
Right.
And the children that we have lost with this have all had fairly serious comorbidities, sickle cell, chronic lung disease, heart problems, obesity, some of the same risk factors for humans, but in a childhood context.
Right.
Normally, they don't have the same level of receptors for the virus in their upper airway that we do as adults. So they tend to get, they may have some virus up there, but they're asymptomatic. Occasionally they'll run a fever for a couple days. And if they should get in a little bit of a jam, we have safe, effective therapeutics to treat this. We've had these since March of 2020. Generally, they do very well. They don't really transmit it to each other, and they don't really transmit it to adults.
Right.
Having virus in your airway is one thing, but if you're not ill and your nose isn't running and you aren't coughing, then you're not putting it out into the environment.
On that point, Steve, let me ask that question, because the CDC director recently admitted that the viral load, which I presume, I'm not a doctor, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the viral load, that is to say where you kind of retain some level of virus in your airways or otherwise, she admitted that those who are vaccinated carry a viral load 3 to 7 times greater than those unvaccinated. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
So let me ask you an extended question. Maybe I'm priming the pump here in the wrong way, but if you inoculate children, you give them this thing, it doesn't really help them. You can actually create conditions where their health is both potentially compromised by having it, and more importantly, you actually make them more prone to be a carrier
Yes.
of COVID, based on what the CDC director said. Am I reading that correctly?
Dr. Walensky, essentially, she's correct. If we take nasal swabs and we measure the amount of virus in an unvaccinated person and in a fully vaccinated person now, and they're both infected, the virus load is about the same, which means they have the same capability to transmit it to another fully vaccinated individual. These vaccines stopped working well around September. And actual DoD study and artificial intelligence study helped to define this.
So let's talk a little bit about the studies and the fact that this COVID vaccine, the one that is being put forth, essentially, as you've said it, and I love this, they're basically trying to inoculate against a virus which is now extinct. Can you explain that a little bit for us?
Right. These RNA viruses, some of them, and when we're talking about viruses, some are fairly stable. If you get a polio shot, it's good for quite a while. If you get a measles shot, it's good for about half your lifetime. Diphtheria, toxin, this type of thing. These are stable viruses that change very little with time, and your immune system is still able to recognize them years later, especially smallpox. I still have smallpox antibodies from my jabs years ago. This is not the same with this virus, because every time it replicates, it's making little mistakes in its genetic code. And it's constantly searching for a way to become better in the human body, either to replicate faster, greater quantity per unit time. It's looking for a survival advantage. That's what these RNA viruses do, to the point that the original Wuhan virus, the original Wuhan strain, the alpha and the early beta strains, or clades of this virus, really no longer extinct. They've gone ahead and mutated into other things. These vaccines were raised against the original Wuhan sequence, and when things first kicked off here. So again, these have mutated away. And the more you vaccinate a population, the more you tend to drive the virus evolutionarily into a variant that your immune system won't recognize. You can't vaccinate your way out of a pandemic of this type.
So yeah, so that's a great point. And I don't think people tend to understand that what essentially you're saying is they're making it worse by the fact they keep chasing it and essentially giving it the opportunity to find a new path. They're basically allowing it to sustain and expand its ability to live through this, instead of allowing natural immunity, herd immunity, to be effective in basically letting it become an endemic. And people, Steve, I believe that we're to the point of, I'm not the doctor, you are, but I think we're almost to the point where we're at an endemic, that we're always going to have some form of this floating around.
It's in the white-tailed deer population now.
Yeah. So
we're not the only animals.
Right. So one other point that I'd like to make, and by the way, for the audience to understand, I want to circle back with Steve and probably our other senior fellow, or one of our distinguished fellows, Gordon Chang, to talk about virus origins at some point, because clearly, I don't want to get off track here, Steve, but it seems to me Dr. Fauci has been way less than honest about the gain of function, because what you just described regarding the way this virus replicates and is able to sustain itself sounds like that does trace its way back to being gain of function research as a result of that. Is that an accurate? I don't want to get off the tangent, but it seems to me that links together. I'm an intelligence officer. I try to put pieces together, but I'm not an expert in this area.
The virus itself does gain of function.
Yeah.
If you give it enough leeway. So we're living at population densities now that we've never lived at before. Our mega regions, this type of thing. Air travel, 24 hours, you can be in Borneo into JFK Airport. All of these things are combining. And now we have a virus that's very adaptable, very mutatable.
Yeah.
Even if it's not trying to, it's mutating just by the way it replicates. Well, so these are ideal things. We were going to get a pandemic of this type. 2015, one of the bat viruses came out of China, and it was able to pass directly from bats into human cells and tissue culture. Yeah. So we knew these things were out there, but no one would even imagine they'd be doing gain-of-function research with this thing.
Well, no, we should talk about that, because we've had other folks on our program, to include Representative Andy Biggs and others, who want to talk about this more. So we'll come back to that. Yeah. So the last question I have for today, Steve, is something I can't ignore. Being a parent, being someone who basically, I've had it. I don't feel I need it now. Yeah. The severe crippling side effects and death. I saw a thing from Ireland where they had the potential side effects of being vaccinated. And of course, the very last bullet is a potential side effect is death. Steve, I don't know about you. You're a doctor. I'm not. I don't think death being a side effect is something most people would want to sign up for. Am I wrong about that?
No, and the problem is, although these are rare, we have really no way to pick if we vaccinate an adult or a younger one. Yeah. Who's going to have a reaction? Yeah. There's no way to plan ahead of time. You can be fit and healthy and end up losing your foot from a blood clot. This has happened. These are still experimental vaccines. They were essentially crammed down everybody's throat. The national pandemic plan was always to find a suitable antiviral treatment and to concentrate on that, because we knew that to develop a virus would be very problematic for the coronaviruses. They tried for SARS back in 2005, right, and all the experimental animals died. So we knew you can't always develop a virus into a vaccine. Some you just cannot do this, usually because of their rapid mutation rate. They've tried with a number, respiratory syncytial virus and some others, and it ended horribly. So we suspected that there was going to be problems with this. And the national pandemic plan was geared up to finding a cheap, safe, reliable, non-toxic antiviral compound, and we had one. It had been discovered in 2005. It was an anti-malarial drug. And we had, the office I was with managed to secure 62 million doses of this. It was amazing. These were put into the national stockpile. And a very safe drug. It's been used in rheumatoid arthritis, hydroxychloroquine. It's been used for 50 years. Never any cardiac problems.
I took it in Afghanistan. So
yeah, and to give this to an outpatient within the first 7 days of symptoms. When you catch COVID, you know you've got it. Right. You know exactly what's happening. And you just simply take 3 tablets the first 24 hours, and then 2 tablets every 12 hours for the next 4 days. You get sick a little bit, but you get better. Right. And you develop a cross-reactive, long-lasting immunity. There's 79 papers out there now, research peer-reviewed, showing that the immunity from a natural infection is vastly superior, because you're looking at, when you're naturally infected, you're looking at all the proteins of the virus that make it up. Right. When you're having it injected into you, you're looking at one protein. And if that protein is prone to mutations, it's not going to be too long till your immune system no longer recognizes it, and this is where we're getting.
Right. No, look, Steve, my friend Louis Gohmert followed the very treatment you just said, plus zinc.
Yeah.
And he's no spring chicken. Louis in his 70s.
Yeah.
So he was not down any. I mean, he basically got it, went through the treatment you just mentioned, little zinc, going to a bad barber, which he told me about happening when he was doing this. But, barbers are not a separate issue. We don't want to talk about barbers here. But Louis came through it rapidly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in good shape. So it's clear it works. So this comes back to a related question.
Yeah.
Why on earth are we seeing real therapeutics, real methods of lessening the effect of virus and increasing someone's resistance? Why are we seeing this information essentially pigeonholed? I mean, this is not the first time we spoke about this. Why are we seeing this?
Conflicts of interest within the CDC and within the FDA. There's no other way to explain this. We've identified the people involved, and it's a real torturous story. But the drug companies have been running this pandemic response, not the health professionals.
Well, it seems to me that's something that all parents need to be concerned about, and we're gonna have this paper, Dr. Hatfill's paper, on our website, and we'd like you all to consider it a resource we'd like you to use to educate yourself and others. And so, Steve, is there anything else you want to add before we go today? Because we're going to obviously ask you to come back and talk about a little bit more of this regarding some of the origins issues. But is there anything else you want to tell parents or the public on what we need to do?
COVID-19 is a treatable infection. We need to start the treatment within as soon as possible the onset of symptoms. But if we can get some medicine into you within the first 4 or 5 days, again, you'll get sick a bit, but you'll come out of it all right with a very broad spectrum immunity, able to handle minor variants, and in a lot safer shape overall than a imperfect vaccine, which at the moment is it's not protective.
Yeah. So, and that's a great way to end it. Thank you, Dr. Hatfill. We deeply appreciate your integrity and willingness to speak the truth, no matter what comes out of it. And I think parents all across the nation need to be grateful for your service to the nation and what you've done. So thanks, Steve, for joining us today.
Thank you, Tony.
And thank you all for being part of this Thought to Action presented by the Herb London Center for Policy Research. Please remember to hit that like button. Please subscribe and share. Get this information out to those you know who need it, and get it out so that people can understand what the reality of the pandemic is, how to examine options to sustain your family and others, and be sure to allow for the best possible course of action for you as an individual, not what you're told to do. Think for yourself. Please join our Patreon community and come back and see us next time for our next Thought to Action. Thank you for joining us.